Thank you so much, Ferdy, and thank you so much to our guests this afternoon. It's lovely to be with you all. We are speeding towards the end of the year at a tremendous speed, and it's actually quite scary. So I think this will be our second last session for this year. And the month of September has actually had quite a number of commemorative days that focused on a number of disabilities in terms of visual impairments, in terms of hearing impairments. So we thought it well to actually do a session then this afternoon to focus on people with disabilities, but then specifically within the workplace environment. So yes, it's a very interesting topic, and it's a very demanding topic specifically for facility managers if we have to then accommodate people with disabilities in our buildings. So the theme for this afternoon is the understanding the role of well-executed facilities management in providing a safe and comfortable working environment for people with disabilities. So I thought it well to first just have a look at facilities, what we mean by facilities. Then I would like to ponder a little bit in terms of different buildings. I would like also to focus a little bit on different types of disabilities that we find. And then I'd like to go over to the legislation, focusing quite heavily specifically on the SANS document, the SANS S document, focusing on all the different standards there, and then bringing that into the specific disabilities per se. And then last but not the least, actually then evaluating a specific building or a specific site, and just giving you a little bit of guidelines in terms of, or guidance more in terms of what you can focus on. So first, let's have a look in terms of overall, why is it important in terms of people with disabilities? Why do we have to focus on that? In South Africa, a total number of just under 14 million people are currently working. Now, roughly about 1% of those people, of those 14 million, are actually in the workplace, and the Employment Act actually states that there needs to be 3% of the workforce that should be coming from people with disabilities. So in response to that, it is the responsibility of the employers to create a safe and comfortable working environment for all of the employees. In other words, all 14 million, but also the ones with disabilities. And obviously, we've got to think very carefully what we do there, and we've got to ponder in terms of how we then actually manage our buildings, focusing on that. The broader public then also makes use of public spaces and other buildings. They come and visit commercial buildings, public offices, municipal buildings, government buildings, places of worship, hospitals, schools, etc., etc. And it's mandatory for these facilities also then to comply to the SANS specification, providing specific access to them. Now, let's just quickly do a recap, and I'm sure you're very well familiar with this already. IFMA states that facility management tailors the physical workplace to the people and the business or the organization. It combines management and the business with the most current and professional and technical knowledge to provide a people-oriented and effective work environment. And as we go through the presentation, you will just see in terms of the technical knowledge and how well you can actually implement that also from in a disability point of view. Now, SAFMA states FM as an enabler of sustainable enterprise performance through the whole life management of productive workplaces and effective business support services. It's quite a comprehensive concept, but I think it defines it well. Global FMs definition, facility management is the integrated management of and the provision of services for organizational housing and housekeeping to support the occupants with space, resources, services, and protection, resulting in optimal productivity and cost control for the organization. And you guys all come from a global FM training environment, so you should be very well familiar then with this. Now, what is defined then as a facility per se, not just facility management? It is defined as something designed, built, and installed to serve a specific function, affording a convenience of service, for example, your healthcare facilities, educational facilities, commercial buildings, offices, and the like, shopping centers, etc. Just a couple of types of facilities with all of the different services there. Now, all of these services, when you start thinking in terms of disability and the management of services and sites from a disabled point of view, these different services need to then also be accessible to the people with disabilities. So who will then be visiting the building? I think you should know by now that your individual building users or the consumers of the FM product can be split into your primary users and your secondary users. The primary users are those people that actually sit in the specific facilities or are confined to that specific facility, such as healthcare, office space, education, tenants in a commercial space, and then also your secondary users, and that refers to all the visitors then to the primary users. Now, that concludes in terms of what's different facilities. Now, if we have a look at different types of disabilities, there's a couple of them, and I want to list them. We're not going to cater for all of them necessarily from an FM point of view in a specific commercial building, for instance, but all of these types of disabilities needs to be acknowledged. And that is typically your physical disabilities, your vision impaired disability people, hearing impaired or deaf people, your people with acquired brain injuries, in other words, that was a physical injury, people with intellectual disabilities, your autism spectrum disorders, your invisible disabilities, and then also your so-called progressive chronic conditions. Now, if we think in terms of the typical type of disabilities that will be found in a workplace environment and something that you will then most probably have to deal with, I think it is fairly safe then to say that one can focus on people with physical disabilities, vision impaired people, hearing impaired people, intellectual disabilities, invisible disabilities such as sensory disabilities like your autism, blindness and low vision, hearing loss and deafness, your psychosocial types of disabilities, your depression and anxiety, your schizophrenia, your bipolar disorders, which is all very well manageable if the people are on the correct medication, and then also, of course, your neurological disabilities, such as, for instance, your multiple sclerosis, your chronic regional pain syndrome, of which there, of course, the ergonomics plays a big role, and then also epilepsy, specifically photosensitive epilepsy within the workplace, and then also your progressive chronic conditions. Now, I'll be looking at each one of these disabilities in more detail, but first, let's have a look in terms of when there's people with disabilities in the workplace. Obviously, one will need to provide reasonable accommodation for those disabled people. That is then adapting your existing facilities to make them more accessible, adapting existing equipment or acquiring new equipment, including computer hardware and software, reorganizing workstations, changing your training and assessment materials and systems, for instance, Braille material, restructuring your jobs so that your non-essential functions are reassigned, adjusting work time and leave, providing readers, sign language interpreters, and so forth, and then also providing your specialized supervision, training, and support. So that's then going to be your key focus areas. Now, a safe and workable working environment needs to be created for all of the individuals in a facility, also those with disabilities. And sometimes that can even be an additional guest in your building, such as, for instance, a guard dog for whom you need to provide for. Now, what disabilities do your FM managers typically need to cater for? And I think it's again fairly safe to group it into four main categories. At the top left is your physical disabilities, top right, your intellectual disabilities, bottom right is your visual impairedness, and your bottom left is your hearing disabilities. Now, if we think in terms of the legislation that is actually providing for the provision of safe and comfortable working environment, it's basically the acts that is also related to your OHS. And I'm referring here to your Occupational Health and Safety Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, your compensation for your occupational injuries and diseases, or your COIDA, and then also your Employment Act, because all of these acts basically states that, well, the top two, you need to provide a safe working environment for the employee. The last one, the Employment Equity Act, focuses specifically on people with disability. Let's just quickly run through the Occupational Health and Safety Act. It states that you need to provide for the health and safety of persons at work and for the health and safety of persons in connection with the use of a plant and the machinery, the protection of people, other than persons at work against hazards to health and safety arising out of or in connection with the activities of persons at work. Also to establish an advisory council for occupational health and safety, and to provide also for matters connected thereof. Your Compensations and Diseases Act refers, that's the act that we use to actually determine when an employee is injured on duty. Injured on duty, and the compensation needs to be then determined and paid out to the employee as such. Your Employment Equity Act of 1998 is there to promote equal opportunity and fair treatment in employment through the elimination of unfair discrimination. Now, it focuses primarily on three groups of people, namely Black people, women, and the third one that is mostly applicable to the environment that we're focusing on, people with disabilities. So the code of good practice, the key aspects of your disability in the workplace, will then be focusing on your unfair discrimination, reasonable accommodation, confidentiality and disclosure, and your employment benefits. Okay, now how do we retain people with disabilities in their jobs? By accommodating them fairly within the workplace, retaining them, rescheduling the activities, and rethinking the workplace environment, and then also actively recruiting people with disabilities. That by then and by then only, one will be able to increase the 1% of people with disabilities currently within the working environment to the required 3% target that government actually sets. Now, how do we provide a safer working environment and a suitable working environment for people with disabilities? And I refer you here specifically to the SANS document, that's the South African National Standards document. The specific part that is applicable is that of Part S, that focuses on facilities for people with disabilities. Now, it focuses on a couple of stuff. It first generally explains disability and the concept of disabled people. It gives you specifications in terms of signage, parking, external and internal circulation, floor and ground surfaces, doorways, your doors and door handles, changes in floor levels, specifications in terms of your ramps, stairways, handrails, lifts, toilet facilities, auditorium, grandstands and walls, controls, switches and power points, your warning signals, and also lighting. So let's have a look at each one of them specifically. Now, the facilities that needs to be provided in any building contemplated in Regulation S1 required facilities for persons with disabilities. Persons shall be able to safely enter the building, use all the facilities within it, and leave it. There shall be a means of access suitable for use by persons with disabilities from the main, the acclimated approaches of the building, the ground story via the main entrance and any secondary entrance, and there also should be a means of egress suitable for use by persons with disability from any point in a building to a place of safety in the event of an emergency. I think that is fairly standard and applicable to all building users from an FM perspective, but we've got to think very carefully to provide this for our people within from a disability point of view. Any lift installation that is provided shall be capable of serving the needs of a person with disabilities who are likely to be using the building. Any commonly used path or travel shall be free of obstacles which limits, restricts, or endangers the travel of the person with disabilities, or which prevents persons with disabilities from accessing the facilities provided in a building, and the presence of such an obstruction shall be made evident in a suitable manner to persons with impaired vision, and a suitable means of access shall be provided to any auditorium or hall situated in any building. There should be sufficient open space to accommodate the reasonable number of persons who use wheelchairs and other assistive devices too. Secondly, when we start focusing then on parking, normally we work with one parking space per 50 motor vehicles, dependent then also on the specific type of facility. If it's, for instance, a healthcare facility or a rehab type of environment, it drops to 1 per 25. But we'll go through that also later. Suitable means of parking shall be provided, whether such parking areas would be inside or outside of the building, and it should be on the ground story of the building. Then also from a toilet point of view, where toilet facilities are required and the building is in a required facility for persons with disability in terms of the Regulation S1, an adequate number of such facilities shall be suitable for use by the persons with disabilities. Okay, and we'll focus on each one of them also in more depth. From a signage point of view, facilities that are included in a building specifically for the use by persons with disabilities, such as wheelchair accessible parking spaces, wheelchair accessible toilets, and platforms for stair lift shall be indicated by the international symbol for access. And there you see it. It is the wheelchair on the green background at the main entrance of and at any other suitable position in the building, and in a suitable position to indicate to persons with disabilities the route to exit such a facility. And clear legible signs shall also indicate the directions and name of an accessible facility and shall incorporate the international symbol. Important, the height of the lettering shall not be less than 50 millimeters. Okay. All right. In terms of the signage and how large the signage should be, it's interesting to keep the following scale in mind. The viewing distance in meters. In other words, you will see that the closer you are to the specific sign, the height of the sign actually drops. So you should be from 50 meters from a specific area or sign. The height of that sign should be 160. That's again just a specification for your convenience. In terms of parking, for employee parking, at least one parking space shall be available for persons with disabilities. And then in addition to that, another 1 per 50. And I also mentioned previously also one parking space per 25 spaces or a part thereof at least and at least 20% of the parking spaces at rehab and medical facilities shall be provided. The parking spaces for the vehicles used by persons with disabilities shall be of a suitable length and shall be suitable on and accessed from a surface that is not steeper than 1 to 50. Any parking space provided for vehicles used by persons with disabilities shall be located, this is important, within 50 meters of an accessible entrance. Parking spaces provided for vehicles used by persons with disabilities shall be clearly demarcated as being intended for the use of persons with disabilities only. The entry and the routing of any parking space designed for persons with disabilities shall be provided with a clear height of at least 2.4 meters, obviously then to allow for wheelchairs if that is applicable to that specific disabled person, and shall allow for the entry of the vehicle suitable for use by wheelchair users. Okay, specifically if there's a hoist then also involved to carry the wheelchair on top of the car. All right, so just a little bit of tongue in the cheek. Being fat and ugly doesn't mean that you are disabled. So please then go and park elsewhere. It's very convenient to park on the disabled parking. In terms of your external and internal circulation, an accessible route shall form part of the external and internal circulation route. Passenger loading zones on public streets and pavements to the accessible building entrance, which will then be served and the facilities to the facilities inside the building. Again, point number 3, importantly, to the ground story of the building. So also the clear width of the parking surfaces shall not be less than 900 millimeters. I think that is important to take notice of that. If the clear width is less than 1.5, an accessible route shall be provided. And there we also have got some specific. It's also important that there should be ample turning area for the wheelchair, 1.5 meters in diameter. Doors shall not be permitted to swing into the turning spaces. So doors should always then be swinging towards the outside. No obstructions should be in the path of travel. Protruding objects shall not reduce the clear width required for the accessible route. Hanging signs, lights, awnings, and objects that protrude into the circulation spaces shall have a clearance of at least 2 meters above the trafficable surfaces. Windows and doors shall not open across a walkway, corridor, stair, or ramp. When indicated parking for persons with disabilities is provided, a curb cut that has a slip-resistant finish and gradient that does not exceed 1 to 12 shall be provided immediately adjacent to the bay. That's the spec. And there you can just see a nice graph of that directly next to the parking area, and it needs to be 1.5 in width, and then also a 1 to 12 gradient. Floor and ground surfaces, and this is all part of your SANS documentation and specifications. Your floor and ground surfaces form an integral part of the accessible route throughout the site, and it should be stable, firm, and slip resistant. Carpet tiles, or any other floor finishes shall be securely attached, and the pile height of the carpets shall not exceed more than 3 millimeters. Otherwise, your wheelchairs are going to battle to go through it. Openings in the floor finishes or ground surfaces shall not exceed 13 millimeters in diameter, and where the opening is elongated, the long dimension shall be placed perpendicular to the dominant direction of the travel. So the vertical change in the level between the two floor surfaces or at the threshold shall leave a flash finish and shall not exceed 5 millimeters in height. Cobbles, gravels, and stand or other raised or loose finishes shall not then form part of an accessible route, because you back over that with a wheelchair. In terms of your doorways shall allow free access for your wheelchair users. Your clear opening shall be at least 750 millimeters. Where possible, the width should be 800. Okay. And there you can see more or less 750 to 800. That is your doorways in your restricted areas. And at the bottom there, 1.5 is 1 meter 5 between the different sliding doors, so that the one door can close behind the wheelchair. In terms of your door handles, very interesting, a handle fitted to the door leaf of the door in an emergency route or in a feeder route or in any compartment containing toilet facilities for use by persons with disabilities shall be of the lever type, with a lever at least 150 millimeters long, and shall be installed at a height that does not exceed 1 meter. Round door knobs are difficult for people to handle. It should be openable with one hand. It should be horizontally aligned, and your door furniture with sharp protruding edges is hazardous and should not be then used. There's an example then of your vertical handle and the specification then for that. In terms of your ramps, of course, the gradient is 1 to 12, and it should have a clear trafficable surface not less than 1.1 meter wide. Okay, your ramps should have a non-slip surface, obviously, have a landing at the top and bottom, not less than 1.2 in length. Also comply with the requirements between the landings, the handrail on both sides of the ramp, or where the width is greater than 2.2, the central handrail is in accordance with the requirements with the where the gradient is steeper than 1.15. So that's typically some examples of ramps. In terms of the stairways, 900 millimeter is the width for that, again with a proper landing. And the rise of each thread step shall be the same height and shall then not exceed that more than 170 millimeters. And that is specifically for your visual impaired clients. In terms of your stairway, still a stairway shall be provided with handrails on both sides of the stairway. The maximum height allowed in a flight of stairs between landings shall not exceed 1.5. The stairway shall not include any winders. Not spiral stairways is not preferable in any of your accessible routes, and your outdoor stairs and outdoor approaches of stairs shall be so designed that water will not accumulate on the working surfaces. So there's an indication in terms of your steps of 170 in terms of the height, and also from a consistency point of view. Also in terms of your wheelchair lifts that will make easy access to your wheelchair users. Handrails have also got specifications as per the SANS docs. Handrails shall have an epileptical gripping surface profile that is approximately 50 millimeters wide and 40 deep, and also a circular profile of a diameter not less than 35 and not more than 50. That is just in terms of your easy grip. Handrails shall be securely fixed and shall be rigid. There's some additional specifications on there. I would like to show you that specific photo on that slide. That is also a nice grip for a person visually impaired for additional support then. Again, some specifications on the handrails stating that there needs to be a 300 mm overhang to each one of the attachments with a minimum of 60 mm between the handrail itself and then the wall. Lifts is an interesting one. Minimum internal dimension of 1.1 meter in depth and a 1.4 meter, sorry, 1.1 in width and 1.4 in depth, with clear surface finishes. Should have a doorway with an unobstructed width of not less than 800 millimeter. It should have fitted horizontal handrails with a full length of the lift guard sides at the height of between 850 and 1. So that is what's important in terms of that. So you will also see that your lift normally has a mirror, and that is actually for the wheelchair user to be able to see who is coming in behind them. Your lift dials, also in terms of the braille function towards the right-hand side, and important here, it also should be a little lower, not more than 1 meter then in height. So there's again part of exterior lifting later fitted, specifically then also for your wheelchair users. Those are some of the specs that I've already explained now. The clear circular circulation space, 1.5 by 1.5. Audible and visible warnings in the lift lobby and lift car to indicate the lift car approaching. At the arrival of the lift doors opening, the lift doors closing, the lift door requesting and requested, and at which floor the lift then will stop. Your emergency control buttons is just as important. Have a illuminous on the control panel that is not less than 150 lux. For people also with visual impairedness or poorer vision, and then the stop level with the landing on each floor. Then in terms of your toilet facilities, that is the specifications of your toilet facilities. That is quite standard with a grab rail, a specific height for the basin, a specific height for the toilet per se. It is raised. Quite important there is in terms of the space for the wheelchair to be able to be positioned. This is how it looks once it has been fitted and has been fitted properly. So in terms of your auditoriums, it's also quite interesting that there are some specifications for your auditoriums and halls. In terms of the number of wheelchairs that should be able to be accommodated. So it's normally 1 wheelchair per fixed seat of normally 50. So 2 wheelchair positions shall be distributed evenly throughout the facility. For each wheelchair position, a companion seat must also then be provided. Each space for the wheelchair is a little wider than your normal seats. It's then 900 millimeters by 1.4. Interesting enough also there is when you start working with your hearing impaired people, keep in mind that in your auditoriums, the sound systems may be interfering with your hearing aid. So that also should be kept in mind. Even for your fixtures and your fittings, there are some specifications, 900 millimeters and 1.2. That is the average between the different levels. A nice average to work with is about 1 meter. So your sockets and outlets for your electrical fittings, exactly the same. There are some specifications for that. Quite important, emergency warnings, including those in your mechanical circulation installations, shall be both audible as well as visible. So your emergency warning signals include your smoke detectors, your fire alarms, and also your evacuation signs. In terms of your lighting, many persons with disabilities, especially your older people and persons with visual impairment, require higher levels of artificial lighting and also reduced glare. So your persons with hearing impairments may also require a higher level of illumination to facilitate lip reading. Your lighting controlled by passive infrared sensors shall be provided in your external circulation spaces. Contrasting light and dark colors and levels of luminance should be used to assist person with visual and also your intellectual impairedness because of your photosensitive epilepsy. So let's just focus on specific aspects of specific disabilities within the workplace. Your visually impaired people, they need some additional assistance and guidance in terms of navigation, orientation, visual information, and also your non-visual information. So you need to be able to provide them from a tactile point of view at your stair landings, where they will know they're at the top of the stair landing or at the bottom of the stair landing. Your cobbled walk areas for your blind people is very much recommended and works very well. Your guide dogs for your visually impaired people, they also come into the facility. So you need to cater for space for your guide dogs to a bowl of water where they can be fed, also a piece of garden where they need to go out. So that is part and parcel of the FM requirements. Also in terms of your braille keyboards that can be used within the working environment. In terms of your hearing impaired people, you get excellent phones with visual recognition of the caller. Your signal and your noise ratio is quite important there. And your communication points and aids are also something that you need to consider. Also, people with your invisible disabilities, that refers to people that suffers with a balance impairedness, and you find that your balance disabilities goes hand in hand also with your hearing impaired disabilities. Impaired balance can be caused by sensory loss or by motor dysfunction. Therefore, care should be taken in the built environment to avoid injury to children and adults with impaired balances. Your surfaces should be slip resistant, friction free, and even, since persons with impaired balances are prompt to tripping and falling. Your steps and ramps should be fitted with handrails on both sides to reduce then also the risk of your cognitive and your perception disabilities. Persons with your cognitive impairedness, for example, persons who have neurological impairments and persons with intellectual impairments experience difficulties with cognition and perception. Learning disabilities such as dyslexia also have an environmental problem. Tripping and falling and an increased tendency to bump into objects are also then very much applicable. People with touch disabilities, impairment of sensation can also be dangerous, specifically when contact with hot or very cold surfaces is likely. Protection from your hot pipes in your toilet facility should be provided. Persons who have your spinal cord injuries often lose the sensation in their lower limbs and can then be burnt on top your pipe work from taps, or even from the heat of the underside of a sink. That's also then very much applicable. Persons with certain cognitive impairments might not even react to burning, thus causing themselves injury. Thinking also here in terms of your canteen area and the hot surfaces there. Then, of course, you also have so-called terminal conditions in our work environment. Terminal conditions such as, for instance, HIV and AIDS, also cancer, and also your late stages of diabetes may very well result in incontinence and fatigue. And obviously that has got an impact again on the management of your ablutions from an FM point of view. Now, there's a very nice document that has been published. It's called the Promoting of the Right to Work of People with Disabilities, and it has been published by the Human Rights Commission. I've provided you with the ISBN number there, and it's actually a toolkit for the private sector that focuses on a couple of things. It looks at the employment profile, your policy matters, and providing you also guidance in terms of drawing up some applicable policies, reasonable accommodation within the workplace, and also then in terms of communication. So please see if you can find the document. It is downloadable from the internet, and it's a very nice tool that you can actually use to assess to what extent your building or your site actually complies in terms of people with disabilities. That's just a couple of thoughts that I thought I'd like to share with you this afternoon. And perhaps we can open up the floor for some questions, if there are any.
Thank you very much, Sanet. We thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't see any questions in the chat box as yet. So guys, if you do have any questions, please feel free, unmute yourself, and you can ask your question directly to Sanet.
Hi, Sanet. It's Tibato here. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
I just want to ask, I'm at a school and we've recently have to accommodate a service dog.
Okay.
Because in terms of inclusion and support learning for our students. So I was just wondering, do you have any insights regarding how to accommodate a service dog within our facilities?
And your is the learning the learner also boarding?
Yes, it's not a board, it's a daily, every day, yes. So the learner comes with a service dog every day, and the service dog has to accompany the learner in their classroom.
Correct. So they don't stay together in the hostel. So, no. But at least they come every day. So you will need to provide a space for the dog as such. On arrival, the dog will need to accompany the learner, then obviously also to the different classes, because that's the job of the service dog. But you will need to provide a specific area where the dog can lie down. You will need to provide an area where you can actually provide a water bowl for the dog, a food bowl for the dog, and you need to be able to take the dog out, because obviously lots of water and so forth will have the doggy wanting to go wee-wee. So there needs to be an area also outside where you can actually take the dog per se. Normally, it is the responsibility then of the owner to take care of the service dog himself or herself, because the dog is there then for their convenience and for their assistance. But you need to provide a physical area for the dog then to be kept comfortable while the person is in the classes.
Yes, we've done that. I was thinking, I was checking if we haven't missed any specifications, perhaps in terms of amending our facilities or anything like that. But the water, I will check on that. But we've allocated an area where the dog it goes to the wee wee or poo on demand or on trained on schedule. So it's
Yes.
trained. But that we've got to be. But I was just checking if there are other specification, perhaps maybe from Sanas, nothing. We haven't missed anything. Okay.
Nothing more specific in terms of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure. Anything else?
Hi, Sanet.
Hi, Chris.
Just something interesting about disabled people that I find is 90% of the times the workplace is not the biggest hazard. Is getting to the work. That's the big problem. The transportation, public transport, that's a huge problem for people with disability. And then in the office space, one person with a certain disability and another person, you must really try to see and talk to those people and ask them what they really need. The one will need it 1 meter high, the other one will need it 1.2 meter high, type of thing. But talk to, or the table height, I mean the table height, not the
Yeah.
elevator. So talk to the people in that. If you do get somebody, a lot of disabled people will come to work and say, thank you, I do get, at least I found a job, and then they will suckle on and not moan about lightning and toilets but talk to them, ask them, then they will tell you what they really need and can access them. The other, and just interesting, it's not that popular yet. People with epilepsy, there's dogs, they also dogs that can fill it on, so people start using those dogs for them as well.
Yeah, indeed, that is indeed the case. You will find that your animals have got a very high sensitivity in terms of the mood of the people, and specifically when there is an epileptic seizure coming on. There you are quite right. You find normally that the dogs will actually, or even cats. What we found within the hospital type of environment or a rehab type of environment, as soon as a patient really gets ill or uncomfortable, or there's a seizure, or there's a heart attack coming up, you will actually find that the animals come and call you and take you to that particular patient. And then you will find that there is definitely a seizure that is within the next half an hour or hour due to happen. It's very interesting. The animals definitely do feel it coming on. And I think what's quite interesting and important, what Chris is mentioning, is that the importance of your FM manager and your client-oriented approach towards your building user. So some disabled people are very tall, other are short. Your taller people will sit higher, physically higher, because of the height of the torso in your wheelchair. So therefore, the 1.2 meters will be more comfortable for that person. Where another person may be shorter, and therefore 800 millimeters or 1 meter will be more comfortable. Obviously, if it is a light fitting or electrical socket fitting, you will not be able to adjust that easily. But the mere fact that you are addressing your client and not necessarily informing them, but finding out and inquiring in terms of how can we make the environment more comfortable and more convenient for you. That in itself, you are winning the customer over to a good or a better FM experience in totality. And I think that is critical. From an FM point of view, that's what we want. That is exactly what we want. Anything else?
Hi, Sanet. It's Figiso speaking. Not much of a question, but I've had experience, especially at my current building, where we've had able-bodied people, clients using the disabled bathrooms, but not in a manner of like, I'm just going to the bathroom. They would be in there for like 30 minutes at a time, that the people that we're trying to accommodate ended up coming to us, to get some intervention, because when they need to use the bathroom, then they couldn't get in there because somebody's occupied it for like 30 minutes at a time. And then we had to like obviously get our clients involved and get comms sent out, because it is unfair, especially because the people in wheelchairs can't then go into our bathrooms, unfortunately, because they're not really, they're not really accommodated. So where we did have the space for them, we found that some of our clients weren't really considerate of others.
Definitely, and I mean, it's just disrespectful because you will also find specifically your people with your physical disabilities, if they need to go to the bathroom, they need to go to the bathroom. And it's very inconsiderate for people with no disabilities to actually then occupy the bathroom for that duration of time. If it's just quickly and all the other bathrooms are occupied, it's a different story. But I think there, it's again a communication aspect, like you say. You actually need to then intervene and tell your non-disabled clients, listen, that this bathroom is not for you. It's really for your disabled clients, and please be aware that preference should be given to your disabled people. But it is a problem. It is a problem indeed. Okay, anyone else? Managing your building from a disability point of view has got a lot more that you've got to keep in mind than just plain common sense that we find is so applicable in your commercial buildings and normal buildings, because it is regulated by building regulations and documentation. So therefore, when you enter if you are appointed as a new facility manager and you go onto that site, look at the site from the perspective in terms of, does it comply from a disability point of view? And it's not just your commercial buildings and so forth. If you think in terms of your public using normal shopping mall centers and so forth, even the shopping malls and so forth are not disabled friendly environments, and you really sometimes battle from one floor to the other, and specifically the parking areas. It's not restricted for disabled parking only, and you also need to manage that carefully. Otherwise, anyone can park on the disabled parking, and your person with a disability then actually battles to get parking close enough to the entrance and so forth. So, guys, if there's no other questions, I hope that it was informative. Lots and lots of specifications. The SANS documentation is not downloadable. You actually have to buy that. So, but it's always good to have the documentation on your file, in your FM files, for reference purposes, so that you know exactly what the specifications and the requirements are. So you can also visit the the SABS site and see the different specifications, and actually then purchase it from there as well. But I'm hoping with this presentation, it gave you just a little guidelines, and it just gave you some specifications that you can just have access to when you quickly have to cross-reference something with some nice sketches in terms of layouts of spaces. So thank you so much for your attendance. It's always lovely to host this. Our next session, guys, will be towards the end of October, and we're going to focus on mental health in the workplace. And the HR manager of one of the largest facility management companies in South Africa will be hosting that. That's also one of our large clients, and quite a number of the people on currently on the session is also a part of that specific company. So we will keep you informed on our website. We will send you some invitations, but we'll then be focusing on mental health within the workplace from an employee point of view, and we're hoping that you're also going to enjoy that. And by the way, today is International Coffee Day. So go and make yourself a nice cup of coffee and go and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thank you so much for your attendance, much appreciated.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you,
Sanet,
Sanet.
I saw Elian just raised his hand. We've got time for
Sorry?
one question. I saw Elian raised his
Hi,
hand.
Elian.
We've got time for one
Hello.
more.
Sorry, I
Your
came in a
comment,
little bit.
Elian?
I came in a little later. Yeah, my comments more pertaining to, and I don't know what was covered earlier, but just in terms of like from a emergency perspective, and just having at least your emergency teams, especially from an HR perspective, aligning it and communicating so that the emergency teams know who in their buildings, who are in their facilities in the event of emergency, just being able to go and know where the person is located in which area can be quite helpful, especially from a disabled perspective.
Indeed, Elian, you're so right there. And it actually falls, if you read this document and you go through it, it's actually addressed in terms of your employment profile, knowing exactly, which employees suffer from what, but keeping in mind in terms of not sharing too much information in terms of a specific disability. It may be something like an anxiety or something like that. So that is still quite important that you need to keep in mind. But the policy should be covering that, and very important is in terms of the communication, specifically there in terms of your teams, your emergency teams. Indeed. Valuable comment. Thank you, Elian.
Okay, guys, I think that brings us to the end of today. Sanet, thank you so much for the presentation. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. You must have a lovely afternoon. Ciao.
Thanks,
Ciao.
FM team.
Bye,
Have a nice
bye.
day.
Cheers,
Bye.
everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.